This week, I wandered through winding streets, crossed a medieval bridge, and flew over a river. Literally. Spain's city of layers had a few surprises waiting. Let's do Toledo. Welcome to Toledo, Spain. We're only about a half-hour train ride from this capital city of Madrid. This was the capital city of Spain till 1560 when Madrid took it over. Toledo is also known as the city of three cultures because Jews, Muslims, and Christians coexist here and actually have some very strong cultural influences. Before we get into the cultural part of Toledo, let's talk about the geography because in this case, it's quite interesting. It's surrounded by a river on three sides. And medieval walls are still visible. Kind of looks like a moat, really. There are a few bridges crossing the river Tajo, or Tagus in English, and some date back 2,000 years. To get across the river, most will walk, but let's do it in an unconventional way. I told you it's unconventional. We are over the Rio Tajo, which happens to be the longest river in Spain. It even goes through Portugal. It runs 1,800 kilometers. What an incredible view this is. Okay, I'm looking at a map that's on the ground. We were around here. We crossed the San Martin Bridge. We're around this area here, and all the way over there is where we want to be ultimately. It takes about 45 minutes, I'm told, to walk from one side to the other. A little tough walk, though. It is very, very hilly, so be warned. But a typical trip across the river involves walking over one of the medieval bridges and through defensive towers like this one. And immediately we see the multicultural influences in the city. It's got a Muslim influence. Go through the tower, and on the other side of this tower, remnants of the Christian influence. Once you walk through this particular bridge, you're in the Jewish quarter. And there are markers reminding us of the Jewish community that lived here. They thrived in Toledo in the 12th and 13th centuries. Walking around early in the morning is a great time to check out some ad hoc art before the stores open and this lifts up and then you can't see it. If you only visit one landmark in the city, it probably should be the cathedral. This masterpiece was built between the 13th and 15th centuries, and it is, by any description, magnificent. But from what I read, this cathedral is much more than a church. It's a museum filled with faith-based treasures. All right, we're going to go head into the cathedral right now. I guess how I would describe this place, incredibly ornate. This is a Gothic altarpiece built between 1497 and 1504. Right below the altar is a crypt. And down here are the skeletal remains of Saint Ursula. She was a 4th century British woman who was probably a princess. Legend says she was killed along with her other virgin companions near Cologne, Germany, for refusing to renounce their Christian faith. Back above ground and behind the altar is this skylight. But to call it simply that is a gross understatement. It's called transparente and lets light in such a unique way because it's part sculpture, fresco painting, and architecture. Figures of angels, saints, prophets, and swirling clouds seem to be tumbling from heaven. It's just so breathtaking. And some poem even described it as the 8th wonder of the world. Let's go check this out. It's called the Chapter's House. The Chapter's House is where meetings were held by the governing body of the cathedral. Pretty magnificent looking meeting space, don't you think? This is the Sacristy. And here are pieces from arguably one of the greatest artists of all time and credited with being the architect of the Spanish Renaissance, El Greco. This Greek-born artist lived in Toledo for 37 years and is so well thought of here that there is a museum in the city just for him. But the cathedral also has works from other greats like Goya, Titian, Caravaggio, and Velázquez. Along those lines, check out these choir stalls. Each one is individually carved and has biblical scenes, the recapturing of Toledo by the Christians, mythological figures, and even funny depictions of everyday life. Just as I was leaving, I'm checking out the courtyard. We're outside. Look at this. Art to rival the works inside the cathedral. And in a secluded spot off the cloister is the Chapel of St. Blas, which features art from the late 1300s. From the cloisters, you get this great view of the bell tower. One of the biggest bells in the Christian world is in that tower. It weighs in at almost 20 tons. Now we're inside of a former synagogue. They turned it into a church when the Christians took over in 1085. We are at the Escuela de Traductores de Toledo. Translation, School of Translation, or Translators. Back in the 1200s, scholars in Toledo translated Arabic and Hebrew writings into Latin and ultimately Spanish. This is during the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages were that time between the 5th century and give or take the 14th century when little advances were being made in culture and science. The scholars in the Renaissance used those writings as a basis for helping make huge advances in science and culture and art. A lot of translation work is still being done, and those translations are seen as helping bridge the gap between cultures. Walk around Toledo and you can't help but wonder, how is it so well preserved? Well, I did a Google on that, and what it says is that Toledo is considered one of the holiest or the holiest city in Spain, and invaders were very respectful not to destroy hallowed ground. We are on the grounds of a very impressive building, probably the most impressive building outside of the cathedral here in Toledo. It is Alcazar. It was a Roman palace at one point, then became a military fort, military museum as it is today. In July of 1936, the Spanish Civil War was starting. This Alcazar was under siege for 2 months before the nationalists took it over. But it was a propaganda victory for the nationalists, and it propelled them to ultimately take over the country in 1939. If you're short on time, maybe you can skip Alcazar, see it from the outside. But what's really impressive are the views. We're about 300 feet up. This is the highest point in Toledo. Go into the Free Military Museum at the Alcazar and you'll see some Roman ruins. It shows the more than 2,000 years of history of the structure above, and how this high point in the city was important even back to Roman times. This might be a good time to tell you about the merging of cultures here in Toledo. This is a great example of that. This was a mosque that was built in 999. Examples of the reuse of different architectures. Here you can see the pillars that represent Roman pillars, and it also has some Visigothic architecture. The Visigoths were here in the 500s. They took over from the Romans. Then the Muslims came in 711, and finally in 1085, the Christians took over Toledo. See this lettering that's on the side of the facade? Apparently that helps historians figure out a little bit more about the origins of this building. Right in front of the mosque is this, an old Roman road, which really predates the mosque. And under this Roman road is a Roman sewer, which apparently is still being used today. How many things do you know work after 2,000 years? Efforts still continue to restore old buildings, but also to maintain architectural integrity. New and old buildings seem to blend seamlessly throughout this enchanting destination. The Romans put their stamp on Toledo. How? They built this. This is a Roman forum, Roman circus. It's designed to hold 15 to 30,000 spectators, and they would watch horse races, chariot races. And the sheer size points to how important Toledo was during the Roman Empire days. Sadly, when the Romans were conquered by the Visigoths, this forum was abandoned, and not until the Muslims came and occupied Toledo was it used again. It was used for merchants and ultimately as a cemetery. The Muslims were then conquered, and now we're back to ruins. But luckily in the late 90s, archaeologists have been working to find out what these ruins can tell us about Roman life in Toledo. As if you needed a reason to visit Toledo, it's part of the Don Quixote Trail. What is that? Well, it's about a 2,500-kilometer trek through Spain that follows the adventures of Don Quixote. Don Quixote was in the novel by Miguel de Cervantes in the 16th century. Don Quixote was a fictional character, a nobleman who went a little crazy and decided he wanted to become a knight errant. A knight errant is basically a knight seeking adventures, serving the people and rescuing damsels in distress. Don Quixote is considered widely as the first novel, and today it's one of the best-selling novels of all time, selling 500 million copies. Walking these streets is like stepping through centuries of time. The styles of the buildings reflect the various traditions that contributed to this unique city. Each stone, each block, was laid down by hand, witnesses to pilgrims, poets, conquerors. I hope you enjoyed this visit to Toledo as much as I did. Thanks for joining me on Mary Goes Round the World. 3, 2, 1. Here's my tip for you. Toledo, easily done in a day from Madrid, but I would kind of recommend you staying overnight so you can see the magical Toledo at night. Stay in town, in the old town, so you can kind of immerse yourself in the city. Here's a tip for you if you want to maybe save some money. You can get one of these tourist bracelets and you can get into all these for the same price. If you go to more than 3, then basically it pays for itself. Those are my tips of the week for you.